Well, 2 weeks down the road, tabloids have had it all over. It has been all over spreading as Samantha allegedly claims her boss, the deputy solicitor at Mjeno, that is Gash Christopher, harassed her. And this is her story.
Sexual assault is never okay, although some survivors may stay silent for years before sharing their stories.
You can't have put me through this all these years and you are ridiculing and intimidating me. Asha, that was the day, 20th September, that I then went to the Solicitor General's office after the meeting and reported.
Without support, even powerful women fail to the silence that follows a sexual assault.
You have this belief that somebody can actually put you in a position that you've not been in. That man has put me through hell, Asha.
Join us this weekend as we talk to Samantha Mwesigye, a state attorney from the Ministry of Justice, CEO at Trendy Sam Online Shoppers, who fell victim of her boss. Sunday on Her Moment from 5 to 6 p.m. with Asha Kulsum, only on Record TV.
Welcome to the show, Samantha.
Thank you, Asha. Good evening, viewers. As Asha has mentioned, my name is mwesigye Samantha, a senior state attorney with the Ministry of Justice, where I have been employed since 2007. I thank you for picking an interest in my story. I'm quite aware that it broke in the media 2 weeks ago,
Yes, please.
and interest has been quite a lot in this story. One of the reasons why I came out was because
Before we go to the reasons why you came out, can we please have a brief background of who Samantha is, where Samantha comes from? We look at your education, then we get to the tough field of employment, because this is where this whole thing comes from. Yes, please.
My name is mwesigye Samantha, a senior state attorney with the Ministry of Justice, where I've been working since 2007.
Okay.
I'm a lawyer by profession, evidently, having pursued my Bachelor's of Laws from the University of Makerere. I joined in 2000. Prior to that, I was at St. Joseph's Girls Senior Secondary School in Zambia, where I studied both my O and A levels. And then proceeded to Makerere University. In 2005, I joined the Law Development Center to pursue my bar course, which is also called the Diploma in Legal Practice. While in LDC, that is when I first did my clerkship at the Ministry of Justice for a period of 3 months. You had asked me to introduce myself a bit, my personal life.
Yes.
I come from Busheni, in a place called Bumbire. My father is born from there. He died when I was 5. He was married to my mom, who comes from Rukunjiri district in Buyanja. And she bore 3 children. I happen to be the first of 3 children and the only girl. So the others are boys. The one who follows me is 2 years younger than me. He is also a lawyer by profession, a partner in a law firm, and the one who follows him too is a lawyer, pursuing his LLB at Makerere University in 2nd year. The reason I come with this story and the importance you brought about my background, it brings out a lot of emotion to describe the life that I have led.
Exactly. That is one of the things that beat my mind, and I'm like, okay, but she's in the industry. These are lawyers we're talking about, and how come they're facing such a big challenge? We are all human, and we're all entitled to face these. So sometimes it's kind of difficult for someone to understand, because people out there are asking these same questions. They're like, oh no, hold it there. I mean, she's a lawyer. So before we get to that, let's have a little brief background of what takes you to the law school. Because it happens your brother is also a lawyer. I mean,
I think as a little child, I've always wanted to be a lawyer. I cannot remember a single time in my life when I wanted to do anything else. People keep asking me if perhaps I had a dream to do, something else. But from as far back as I can remember, I've always wanted to be a lawyer. We had arguments in the home. It's something that came naturally to me. I actually remember when I went to the university, I was a private student, and I had qualified for a Bachelor of Education, and it was going to be a government-sponsored student. But it even never occurred to me that was an option. But unfortunately, at the time, my mother was cash-strapped. So I kept thinking to myself, perhaps I can do something else, do a little work and see how, but I was not willing, to pursue a Bachelor of Education. So, and little did I know that even my mother was having a battle of wits. She knew that I wouldn't do anything else and was trying to find means for me to pursue the Bachelor of Laws. So when we were about to start school, she puts up land for sale, and that was what actually she was banking on to see me through law school. So unfortunately, the person pays a deposit and then could not be able to complete payment of the land, and I was joining. So it was a whole real hassle, and I can assure you the rest of the years, 4 years down law school, were not any easier. I'm the kind of person who is hands-on. Like I said, I considered doing, work to be able to take myself through law school. And from S6 back, I was working. I had a job in Masindi, so I finished school, went to Masindi and worked. When I then got to the university, I still was able to work throughout law school. I was working for Simba Telecom, and fortunately, my duty station was in Wandegeya, so I was able to actually get to class in time and balance that whole work. And so I've always been that serious, and all through law school I worked. And proud to say I didn't get any retake. But what compelled me was the sacrifice that my mother was actually putting through. Yeah, I remember a particular instance in second year where we were doing an exam, equity and trusts. It was so hard, people walked out of an exam. You open an exam and you're thinking. So I saw all these people walk out, and I said to myself, Samantha, you have got to brave this. You know the reason you are in here. Your mother has sacrificed. So I just said, fortunately, I was a bookworm. So I sat in the exam and wrote everything I had read. Whether it made sense or it didn't make sense, I just said, you know what? I could, at the back of my mind, what was compelling me to go through it was the look at my mother's face when I told her I walked out of an exam. I can assure you, Usher, we would not be sitting across from each other. So I braved it, and I did pass that exam. Well, barely, but I did pass the exam. I'm still convinced to date that Professor Bachivinga read my exam and said, this girl has overread. I'm convinced that really it was a sympathy mark, because it was never one of my best attempts. Yeah, but I went through law school, compelled to complete as a result of, one, the hardship that it took me to join, and secondly, there were naysayers, people who told my mother she was throwing good money after bad, the basis being that I was a girl child and would get into school and get pregnant and not even complete,
how society sees everything.
Yeah, how they look at us, the presumption is that being a girl, you have other options, and you'll get in there, get confused and what. So I went into law school knowing, one, that in spite of the naysayers, my mother had taken a vote of confidence in me and had decided at all costs that I would be able to pursue a law degree. And I went on to do quite well. And at the LDC, I was a government student. I also have, exams that I did. I remember particularly Evidence 1, where I was the best student in the class. So I am where I am on the soul, I can't say soul sweat, because clearly as an African society, that for a single mother, when she stands proud with a graduate, she has a whole school of people who were behind her. Yeah, and so it is that whole school that is behind me now, cheering me on and saying, I stand for your truth. So it also gives me great pleasure that you've given me the opportunity to give you at least an insight on who I am. And so when this then broke out, I had all these issues of, coming into play about my character, etc. But I would like to tell your viewers that we're at a point where it is no longer about who I am or who he is. I keep telling people we're both seasoned lawyers. Exactly. For him to be the Deputy Solicitor General, it's not an office that anyone can assume. You need a brilliant mind and somebody who is able to. So that is not in dispute. I hear things like, he's led the ICC team and etc. and he's brilliant, and as such, his enemies are using me. I want to look him in the face today and say, I didn't choose his enemies and I don't know them. He's sexually harassed me, and it is as a result of that I then sought administrative redress within the ministry. I first wrote him an email on the 11th of June in 2018, where I sat down and chronicled what he had been putting me through all the years, and I said, enough is enough. You've been pursuing a sexual relationship with me, which is not something that I intend to have with you, and I'll never have with you. I ended by actually appealing to him as a doting father. He's a father of 2 girls himself, and saying, as a doting father, really, it goes without saying that were they the ones in this position, you would perhaps, So I thought by tugging at his heart that indeed he would let me be.
Let's first do this before it gets worse.
Yeah. So what actually happened is he then responds to that email and says, noted, was this missive required? Obviously, he is my boss. And Usher, unless you work in the civil service, you cannot know the difference, that we have towards our bosses. He is sir, he is madam. You don't, even in your phone, you save your supervisor as madam so-and-so. It's not something, there are these jokes of traditional women, like your husband calling you and they say Baganda women even kneel when she's receiving a phone call in the absence of. These are realities. These are the realities that we actually have in the public service. In the private sector, you can go to the MD and, say hello. He meets you in the public service. It is not there. It is not there. You have strict structures. You're not able to interface with these people. Even if you have like a formal function, you will not mix and mingle. Mm-hmm. You will sit within the cocoons of your rank, sort of thing. Yeah. So anyways, he responded and said, noted, was this missive required? And obviously, first of all, that I had sent the email already and done this, everyone is asking, why wait all these years? Usher, he is supposed to be retiring next year. I kept telling myself, Samantha, you will go through this. He's about to leave. So it was never my intention to come out. And even at the point at which I did come out to send him that email, I was pushed to do so. I had been sharing with a lawyer friend of mine what I had been going through. And actually, I did not share with this person, like you go to tell somebody a secret. We had been doing negotiations together, some official work, and then we had become close. So one of these times he comes to the office, he was chasing something official, and comes to say hello. But he found me in a moment where I had just had a terrible time with Mr. Gash. He had just lambasted me and abused me. He had this thing whereby he used words, to belittle me. So he walks in and greets me, and I'm not, my usual self. So I greet him and he says, Samantha, what's happening? You're not your usual cheery self. Before I knew it, I broke down and cried. So he closes the door. I have an open door policy at work. And he asks me what is happening. So I tell him I've just had a rough time with my boss. He's, done this. And then he says, but why would you do that? I mean, if, for instance, you have done an assignment wrong, or, someone would guide, it would not,
exactly.
So, and because there were many missing gaps, it was not something he understood until I opened up and said, it is not actually about work. It's about him pursuing a relationship with me.
Which relationship is not welcome.
Yes. So when I tell him that, he says, no way. I've met this guy. He's a gentleman. And so we were not even able to have this discussion because he came to his defense very quickly and said, yeah. So I just let it be, and he gave me space and left. So now, much later, when he started, whenever he would send me WhatsApp messages or what, I'll take a screenshot and send to this friend. It was more a statement of, whereas you disbelieved me when I first told you, this is a reality I am living. So it went on. Every time he would send me untoward messages, I would take a screenshot and send to this friend. So finally, one of the last messages I did send him last year was a message where he was asking to come see me at my place, and I ignored. So much later he says, Samantha, you've not responded to my message. Is it unprofessional for me to ask? I said, obviously it is. So, and then he just let it at that. When we finished that conversation, I took a screenshot and sent it to that friend of mine. He immediately called me and said, Samantha, this has gone out of hand. You've got to stand up for yourself and tell him, when you ignore him, you give him false hope that indeed there may be a time when you may accept. So I was not willing to do so. So he tried to encourage me. It took a long time. So finally I said, okay, let me think about it. And much later, when I then decided I would do so, he had traveled. So he returns, and my friend kept asking me, so have you sent him the email? Have you sent him? So I didn't. But why I didn't send it is that he had these periods where he would be forceful about being into a relationship, and then I would refuse, and then he would be, so mean to me that it would become, unbearable. So it would get to that point where then I think he realizes he's just, overbearing, and he would withdraw. So I would have weeks of reprieve, weeks or even months where he's not saying anything. So from the point where my friend encouraged me to write to him, and the point when I actually wrote to him, there was a passing of time of about 3 months. In which time he always asked. I said, but look here, this gentleman has not said anything in this time. I can't just wake up and start writing to him an email saying, leave me alone, when indeed he's left me alone. So it's going to look like, I am missing the advances, and I'm reminding him to harass me. Okay. So what actually happened is that early last year, I had done an assignment with the Honorable Attorney General, and his secretary had shared my number with his bodyguard. So we were supposed to meet at the summit in Munyonyo, and I passed on documents for him to attend the summit. So the bodyguard calls me and tells me they are on their way. So after that incident, everything, I pass on the documents. It is 2 weeks later, his bodyguard sends me a WhatsApp messages advancing his interests towards me. I read it. I was quite upset, Usher. I said, what does this guy take me for? So I didn't respond because, we are not at the same level. So, and to his credit, he got the message and did not, send any other messages, because I first left it, I think, after he sent the message like a week or 2, then later blocked him. So that passed. Now, the reason as to why I was then able to write him an email was the Attorney General called me for a discussion, and while there, his secretary ask the bodyguard to do something. So when he steps away, I tell her, the last time you gave him my number, he actually 2 weeks later sent me messages, trying to hit on me, and she got livid. She's like, this guy should know his level. He should not have sent such a message. So I tell her, no, Jennifer, I resolved it, as in he got the message. I did not respond, and he did not send any other. Yeah, he did not. So for me, as far as I'm concerned, this is months later, that thing, it ended. She said, no, Samantha, he could actually do it to another professional, so I need to inform the Attorney General. So when she said that, I knew definitely it would get to my boss, and because we have structures within the ministry. So when I finished seeing the Honorable Attorney General, I then went to see my director, as he was then, Mr. Gash Christopher, whom I said, you will be hearing this because I've just shared with Jennifer and she has escalated this, so you are most likely to be brought into this. Then he was upset, said, how could this man do it? Doesn't he know you're a lawyer? And Usher, you cannot believe, not even hardly 3 minutes later, he turns and says, but Samantha, if you are with me, these people would not have the energy to do what? To actually send you such advances. Usher, I was upset. I just said, now see, I'm, just complaining about this. And so it was that very evening that I came home and penned down that email saying enough was enough. So 2 days later, he calls me to his office. We're discussing work. And then after he brought up the email, he actually tells me, Usher, that, when I walked into his office, he turns his computer and says, whenever he's bored, he turns to his computer and sees the love note that I wrote him, referring to the email where I was saying I had had enough. So I tell him, sir, this is not what has brought me to your office. He tells me, no, we have got to discuss this. So he goes on and says, how could you send all this? So I apologize. Like I've said, there is a lot of deference in the public service. I was even forced after that to apologize and say, I got overly emotional. Perhaps I overextended.
So
yeah, I did. Now, immediately after I apologized, he says, Samantha, there is no need for you to apologize. I can see that toll it has taken on you, and I apologize. As your supervisor, I should never have advanced this. And he apologized, and Usher, I let it be. I even called my friend and said, because he needed to, he kept asking me, so what has happened? Because I was even fearing to go back to work. So those first 2 days, I would even lock myself in the office, as in, I didn't want him to see me. So anyways, this friend of mine, I then called him and tell him, we've had this. He says he's apologized to me. He said, well, Samantha, that's good enough. So you moving forward, just forgive him. And, which is what happened, Usher. So that is in June. So he travels to Cuba.
That's June 2018.
Yeah, 2018. When he travels to Cuba, I had a colleague of mine in the office whom I'd been telling what I'd been going through. So I share with her the email. I said, look here, I finally got the courage to stand up for myself and tell this guy enough is enough. She reads the email and says, oh my God, Samantha, how can you write to our boss like this? I mean, you shouldn't have, So this is someone I had gone to for solace, and she just, lambasted me. I shouldn't have spoken to her boss. So I just walk out of her office. Little did I know that she then told him, because a day after I had told her, he now responds with a longer email saying he realizes my accusations were grave and he needs to respond for the benefit of those I may show the email. Usher, when I saw that line, I just knew that my friend had actually told him what I had told her. So I didn't respond to that email. I just let it be. And months later, I then also traveled with another colleague whom I was with in law school. We were very close friends. So while we were there, we had, some issues, and I would leave the meetings and I would go to her room. One of these days, we are having a discussion, and she's talking about my department, how admirable it is, how we have all these opportunities, how we are having it easy. She has no idea what I'm going through. So as we are having this discussion, I break down and cry, and she freaks out. She says, Samantha, what has happened? We're having this. What have I done to you? She panics. And then I tell her, I say, you know, Alene, you people see us move, you know, smiling. You never know. Yeah. What we are what is weighing us down. So anyway, I tell her, you know, and she says, no way, this guy cannot do this. So what, you know, this is somebody, when you see him, he is a professional, he pulls it off so well, you know. So even I coming, it was not something I did lightly. It was not something I did lightly. So anyway, when she tells me there is no way, I just get the email and I show her. She also had the same response of, oh my God, how can you write to our boss like this? Like, I'm telling you, the oh my God is more for the deference. These people are like demigods, you know, you never, you know, so for me to have written and something like that. But Usher, the question is that if I had intended, if it were malicious or what, I could have written that complaint, or I could have gone to the press and said, I'm being harassed. You see, I didn't have to face him. You see, for somebody to be malicious, you use other means, you know, or I could have reported an official quote unquote frivolous, you know. Because
for the start you did not mention the names, but you were just the press, the first print, whatever. Yeah, when I first engaged with the press, it was sort of a wake-up call to say, guys, you know, this is it. There is a hole in the system. I've come to you several times. I'm actually here with my whatever. I needed to give you a chronology. So then that colleague of mine, when we returned from Bujumbura, goes and sees him and tells him they come from the same place in Kisoro. Meanwhile, I had told her, you cannot tell anyone, you know, but she went and told him. So as a result of her telling him that she had seen the email, he then gets upset and calls a department meeting. So this is where everything started from. Usher, in that department meeting, he made me a subject of conversation. He ridiculed me. He intimidated me. He was, you know, it was bad. This is a meeting where we had people, my colleagues, you know, secretaries, you know, and he made me read the email that I had written to him. He first asked me if I had it and I said no. So he chose to paraphrase. And when he started on a wrong note, I said, no, I have it, so I chose to read it. But before I did, I told him, look here, sir, there are very many formal avenues. In the event you felt I was falsely accusing you, you should have invoked those other avenues, other than calling me before my colleagues and embarrassing me. He tells me, he says, Samantha, this is a forum I've chosen to use. You can use any forum you want. So anyway, like I said, meanwhile, I'd been late for that meeting because I hadn't decided whether I should go, because previously they had scheduled 2 meetings, which then got cancelled because I was unavailable. So I got suspicious when the turn of events was a meeting cannot be held in my absence. That is when I got a sense that perhaps the meeting was about me. So I had decided not to attend, but on second thought, I said, you know, in my absence, I won't be able to defend myself. Usher, when I walked into that meeting 40 minutes later, the whole room, people turned to me with this other hostility. And I'm wondering, what's going on? Yeah. So in my absence, he had decided to paint me black and mention that I'm always in his office reporting my colleagues as being corrupt. You know, so he tried to alienate me. Yeah, he tried to alienate me against my colleagues. So I find this hostility, and I don't know, I'm just thinking, I've always been alone, you know, I don't really do groups and all. So I said, I'm not going to have whatever is going on weigh me down. So it was after the meeting that I learned that that's the strategy he had used. Meanwhile, he was misinterpreting or choosing to use one of the paragraphs in my email to him where I had had a discussion with somebody about whether I would receive a pay rise, and I said, and I was told no. And I said, you know, this time you guys, we've had enough. You know, we're going to strike. And I was told, well, we know you guys don't thrive on salary. You know, you thrive on trips and on bribes. And I'm like, what? So the person who was telling me, this was the beginning of the financial year of 2018. And I'm like, we had just been in the financial year, I think like 5 days. And I'm like, well, when you say trips, as in the whole financial year last year didn't go anywhere. Mm-hmm. And then he says, what do you mean? As in, there are so many opportunities, why wouldn't you be able to benefit? And he asks, what did you do to your boss?
that would have been an opening for me to then be able to tell this person that, look here, this is what I'm going through. But I just smiled through it and I said, I think he's just not gotten the opportunity to get to me. You get it? So I've been through a lot. I was victimized. So when I hear things like people say, I came out because I was not getting a benefit, that I was not having trips, I laugh. Because like I've said...
This is said by your colleagues?
No, as in the media. I think he has people whom he's using as propaganda to try and paint me black. And so one of the things that I've heard is that it was a result of my disgruntlement for not being able to have opportunities to travel that I came out. But they've got to pick a narrative and stick with it. Others are saying I actually have been benefiting and traveling, and I have. But it is as a result, and it is as a result of who I am. I go onto the internet, Usher as a government lawyer. There's so many opportunities out there. Other governments train us. I have trained immensely from this government. But it is because of seeking out these opportunities. So you'll be able to get people, they'll fund you for a course, a week, 2 weeks, all expenses paid, accommodation, ticket, etc. And you come back, you will not get any money out of it, but it will be a reprieve from the experience I'm having in the office. So then I hear that's why I came out. And it's really laughable, Let them pick a narrative and stick to it.
With the forum, how did it end up? Because
the meeting, so that meeting, while he did all that, he made me read that letter, and that is when I lost it, Usher. I said, sir, you put me through a lot all these years. I cannot imagine.
How many years are we talking about?
We are talking about since 2005, but 2005, it was just during clerkship, it's 3 months, and because you're not officially there, it's just a training opportunity. You don't meet someone daily, so he has time in the week where he can call you and then give you guidelines on what you missed on the assignment, that sort of thing. So we didn't interface much then, and so until I then joined in 2007, and even then my narrative starts in 2009, because at the time at which I joined, he was the lead government negotiator for the Lord Resistance Army peace talks with Madame Betty Bigombe. So all that period, it was not, even if he was like on paper my official supervisor, he was never into, so someone else was doing that. So then my narrative comes in 2009 when he's fully back, and it was an issue of, it was now an full-blown onslaught where he would always, be asking me out to lunch, asking to take me to a lodge to have sex with me, sending me all these manner of messages. And so he first at that time sat me down and said, you know what, Samantha, because before that it was just covert, making statements and I would ignore. So this time he says, Samantha, I've been telling you what is close to my heart. You're ignoring me. You don't respond. So he says, and I know at least then when you were, meaning when I was at LDC, I was young. So he said he excuses me then because perhaps I never perceived what he was saying, He says, but now I know for a fact you're a grown woman. So when I speak to you and open up my heart to you, you cannot ignore me. I said, well, sir, yeah. I said, as you've mentioned, I am indeed grown. And I had expected that likewise, since you're a grown man, my silence would be clear indication I am not interested. I said, be that as it may, since you failed to get it, I will tell it to you today. We'll never have a relationship because we work together, So anyway, that passes. But in that meeting, that is what I was telling him. You can't have put me through this all these years and you are ridiculing and intimidating me. Usher, that was the day, 20th September, that I then went to the Solicitor General's office after the meeting and reported. He asked me, obviously, why I'd never gone to him. But Usher, like I've said, when you're in the government service, you don't just go to your boss for anything, But even then, people keep condemning me and saying, how come if you faced that in clerkship, you then went back? Usher, you're a woman. How many times have you had this? Be it a tax tout, be it, as in everywhere we go, we hear these things. I go for government meetings. There is no single time when I go out there and I don't hear all these things. Some people even grow past. He pretends he's yawning. Then there's this infamous handshake where, they scratch your palm. We get all this. So the question is, which place is it safe for me to go to? When you see me seated in the Ministry of Justice and saying I have experienced sexual harassment over these years, it is simply because that is where I've been in employment. I'm not going to speak about people where I've gone, for instance, for a meeting and I'm just there for a few hours and I'm leaving. But even there, I have faced it. So I was supposed to quit and go to which organization that there isn't sexual harassment. You even see with the international organizations, this has been the case. I want people to look me in the face and tell me that I should live here, the Ministry of Justice, and go work I don't know where.
Well, you will not find this.
Yeah, they need to list for me one place, one employer where this is not happening. Perhaps I'll pursue that. You get it? So it upsets me no end for people to sit there and pass judgment and say she stayed there for all this time. It's now that she's not benefiting, that she's coming out. But the question is, I faced my tormentor. I told him I'd had enough. He said noted. Why would someone say that? I mean, Usher, how many times have you been falsely accused? What is your first reaction? Yeah, to pick a call and tell somebody, why would you do this to me? You have disbelief that somebody can actually put you in a position that you've not been in. That man has put me through hell, Usher. And when I see people say all these things, I really get upset because one, men out there keep saying things like, how are we going to find our wives if we cannot speak to them before they are women, and you do not have a right to speak to me like trash before you marry me. You don't. And if I am not interested, I am not interested. Others are saying because I'm a lawyer, we are difficult, the best approach is to be forceful. I tell you, as God is my witness, should anyone try to pass those jokes again, enough is enough. After that man has put me through a lot. I've shared WhatsApp messages. He would send me almost, even now when we started and they said we should put our phones in silent, my phone is always on silent. Because that guy would send me messages very early in the morning. Good morning, my dear friend.
That's your boss?
Yeah, he's my boss and I'm coming to office. Good morning, my dear friend. And I would respond like, an hour or so later because this is an ungodly hour. And I say, good morning, sir. For crying out loud, if I was in a relationship with him, would I address him as sir?
No, please.
So you see, there are all these things, the signs are there. I've even shared WhatsApp messages where he says he loves me, is he my father? Or if when I went to look for work, was that what had taken me? When I think of all the things that man has put me through, Usher. When I think about all the things that man has put me through, as in, even right now as I speak, it's coming to 5 months I've not been working. It is after all appeals.
We are going to get talk about her not working for those 5 months later after this book.